They say that the only thing that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men and by extension, good women to do nothing. And I still consider myself to be a good man. And I know there's a few good women out there as well. And I'm hoping that these good people, myself and others included, have decided that we're not going to just stand by and do nothing in the case of Idaho 4. We believe that there was things left out, that the public has been misled, that we haven't been told the entire truth. And because that has happened, if we sit by and do nothing about it and allow those omissions to happen, those potential lies of omission or flat out lies in some cases, then we allow evil to triumph. So in this case, I'm going to push for truth and transparency. I'm going to I have filed legal paperwork. I have filed public records requests. I'm starting a process, and I'm going to share with you what we're doing at the Devil's Advocates and encourage you to support this effort. The devil's in the details. Let's go. All right, out there in the true crime community, I've been hearing more and more. I just recently kind of said, you know what, maybe it's time to think about the idea of suing Moscow Police Department or suing the state of Idaho for lies and omissions, or not coming forward and being transparent, or asking us, for example, as they did in my case when I requested public records from Moscow Police Department for $20,000. They wanted $20,000 from me. I read that letter from Moscow Police Department demanding $20,000. $10,000 of which they wanted up front for them to start the process of giving me the records that I asked for, when they're required, in my belief and my understanding by law, to provide those on a public records request. However, I didn't pay the $20,000, and I kind of put it aside thinking that was just the final answer. But now I've decided, no. That's how we lose. That is how we lose. We sit by, we do freaking nothing when you get bullshit answers. They know, they are counting. They, meaning the powers that be that don't want you to know what really happened in this case, are counting on us not wanting to play the game, not wanting to fight through the bureaucracy, not wanting to get a lawyer, not wanting to file legal steps, not wanting to remind them of the law, because most people will give up. They don't have the time, they don't have the money, they don't have the energy. I don't have one of those, which is a lot of money. So I'm asking for a little bit of help on this. But let me explain to you what I've done out of my own money. I've spent $100 of my own money to start this ball rolling. And I'm going to show you what I've done. I think you might enjoy this. And again, I encourage all of you other YouTubers out there, good men and women who are like myself, who are saying, you know what, let's just not sit by. Let's not sit by and do nothing. Let's actually see if we can hold some people accountable. Again, being careful. We are proceeding to difficult situations because we're talking about legal action against big entities. Police departments, states, it's a scary, scary world. FBI gets involved in there, Homeland Security, those are on the ticket as well. When you get into that kind of thing, you're asking for trouble, and yet all we're doing is asking for a little bit of answers and have them in the interest of public interest. The public has an interest to know what happened in Idaho 4. We have a reason. We have a reason and a vested interest to know what really happened in Idaho 4. And I do not believe we know. They want you to believe. They want you to say the case is over. Bryan Kohberger told you he did it and he did it alone. And that's the end of the story. Shut up and go home. However, here's where I'm going to press the issue. Now watch, this is going to start with two things. We got two things I'm going to show you today. The letters that I wrote about 6 letters, certified, $100 out of my own pocket. And I'm going to need a little bit of help to continue this because I want to press this as far as the ends of the earth because again, I don't want to sit by and do nothing. Here's where we started. Now, I'm going to start with what might be called by some people perjury on the stand. But I'm saying might. I'm not saying that. I'm being careful because that's a legal term and I'm not a lawyer. And so I'm trying to avoid not getting sued. These are all my opinions. Remember that we are giving opinions because we're a true crime channel offering opinions and commentary on the news. I am not a lawyer. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. This is not legal representation. Although I am going to tell you what my opinion of the law is. I'm allowed to give you my opinion. Don't take what I'm saying as legal advice. That's enough of that shit. All right, here we go. On January 23rd, 2025, as you can see on screen, this was the document that was filed in the record, filed 2/21/2025. It was a transcript of redacted proceedings before the Honorable Stephen Hippler on January 23rd. This is the crux of my first complaint and public records request from 3 entities: Moscow Police Department, Idaho State Police Department, and the City Attorney of Moscow. That's where the first 3 letters went, and it's going to have to do with this issue right here. And then we're going to move on to the second issue, which generated 4 letters. And I'll explain that to you when we get there. Now watch this. This is the first one. This went out 2 days ago, certified mail to Moscow PD, Idaho State PD, and the City Attorney of Moscow. Yes, I expect them to stonewall me. Yes, I expect them to say they're not going to answer it. Yes, I expect them to ask me for some ridiculous amount of money. And yes, we will continue to press the issue. And yes, I need a little help with that. Here we go. Transcript, January 23rd. We're going to skip down to page 9 of this transcript when Ann Taylor is questioning Brent Payne, the lead investigator from Moscow Police Department. This is the lead of Moscow Police Department. I would argue, doesn't it sound logical that the lead would probably know what all of his officers are doing? He would certainly have daily briefings about what's going on in the murder case, where are we at right now. Would you think that if you had a lead suspect or a suspect identified in the case, that your lead on the investigation probably knows who that lead suspect is? And yet we're going to have to believe that Brent Payne, as the lead investigator, had no idea who the lead suspect in the case was for weeks, if you believe this testimony that I'm going to show you here and the forming of my complaint. All right, so this is Ann Taylor. Here's what she says. When was the first time you heard heard Bryan Kohberger's name? This is Ann Taylor asking Brent Payne on the stand. The first time I heard Bryan Kohberger's name was December 19th, 2022. Remember, the murders are on November 13, 2022. And Brent Payne says the first time they ever heard Bryan Kohberger's name was December 19th, 2022. Ann Taylor knows, in my opinion, Ann Taylor knows this is a lie, so she starts to lay a trap for Brent Payne. But because we don't have a trial, and we're not going to have a trial because Kohberger pled guilty at the last minute, and there are reasons for that, but because he pled guilty, we're not going to have a trial. But Ann Taylor was laying the foundation for what was going to be basically showing a perjury situation, in my opinion, because Ann Taylor knew it was a lie, what he had just said. First time I'd heard Bryan Kohberger's name was December 19th. And Taylor says, and what was that the result of? And he says that was the result of an investigative genetic genealogy that was being undertaken by the FBI. We had a phone call that evening and we're told Bryan Kohberger's name. Brent Payne's memory is very clear. He remembers the date they first heard of Bryan Kohberger, and he remembers the circumstances. FBI told us we had a phone call that evening. That would show to me, and I would argue, any reasonable person, that Brent Payne remembers this very, very well. He remembers the first time he heard Bryan Kohberger's name, right? He remembers when it happened. It happened on a phone call from the FBI. Ann Taylor continues, because I believe Ann Taylor knows it's a lie. And before that, Mr. Kohberger was not on your radar? No, ma'am. Brent Payne's in trouble. In my opinion, Brent Payne's in trouble. Ann knows it. She's planning on coming back to this, but we don't get to come back to us because we've been robbed of a trial. So we'll do it after the fact. We'll press. I need your help. Here we go. Before December 19th, was the FBI CAS team member co-located with you? Yes, ma'am. So the FBI, before December 19th, before you were given Bryan Kohberger's name, was the FBI co-located with you? Yes, ma'am. How long had he been co-located with you? I don't remember, but it had been several weeks at this point. Several weeks at this point. This is important. I want you to understand. And was that person Nicholas Balance? Yes, ma'am. What other FBI team members? He says there was a lot of team members. He goes on and lists a whole bunch of names. We don't need to worry about that right now. What I just want to point out is what we've gone through right now. She has him say many times through this document, things to the effect of, so prior to the 19th, when you had first heard of Bryan Kohberger's name, did this happen? No, ma'am. So before the 19th, when you hadn't heard of Bryan Kohberger, did this happen? No. So, and she hammered it so subtly, but so well, over and over, laying down a foundation that if it's true, or I should say, if it's not true that the first time they heard of Bryan Kohberger was on the 19th, then they're in big trouble. Now, I know some of you are going to be like, oh yeah, later on came out that they had a car stop with Kohberger. So yeah, they did know his name, but it wasn't relevant to the case at the time. Well, au contraire, mon frere. Now, let me show you the logic and the basis of complaint number 1. And I'm going to read complaint letter number 1 to you so you can see what I've filed and see where my money's going. Because I'm putting my money where my fucking mouth is. That's something that not a lot of people are doing. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm telling you this is bullshit, and I'm putting my money where my mouth is, at least until I run out of money. So here's what we're doing. Now, Idaho State Police Forensic Services released a freaking enormous 2,356 page document of forensic detail that came out well after the plea deal, well after everything else, way after the testimony of Brett Payne, and it has a real problem for Moscow Police Department. And here it is on the screen. Idaho State Police Forensic Services. I think there was a mistake here, and I'm not entirely sure the mistake was on accident. It almost feels like somebody wants this information to come out and leaked it, but I'll get to that in a minute. Idaho State Police Forensic Services Evidence Submission Receipt. This is delivered by Tim Smallridge, and I believe that's from Moscow Police Department, received by Shannon Arredondo from Idaho State Police, I believe, Forensics, look at the date, December 5th, 2022. December 5th, 2022. This is when you're going to see Moscow Police Department. And let me show you the submitting agency. Who submitted this on the 5th of December? December 5th. Who submitted it? The Moscow Police Department submitted it on December 5th, weeks before Brett Payne said they knew of Bryan Kohberger's name. Who submitted it specifically? Dustin Blaker submitted it. Email address, D. Blaker. So now we've got the courier, Tim Smallridge, which I'm presuming is from Moscow PD. We've got the Moscow Police Department on the form from 12/5, and we've got Dustin Blaker from, look at the address, moscow.id.us. He's with the Moscow Police Department, and here's the problem. The next page, look at that. This is the next page. Look at the bottom, page 1 of 5, and it goes 2 of 5, 3 of 5. Here's the first page of that. Suspect number 1, redacted, no name. Suspect number 2, Bryan Kohberger. OMFG. December 5th, 2022, weeks before the 19th, when Brett Payne said, I first heard the name Bryan Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger's name is on that fucking piece of paper. And by the way, all these other documents, it seems like, have that suspect 1 and 2 redacted. I was going to show you an example real quick. Shit. There it is. There you go. Well, that one just has 1 suspect. No, that suspect and then subject. So, and that one just has 1 suspect. But on the 5th, there were 2 suspects. Let's go back and look at it one more time, because I gotta make sure you understand the basis of this. Suspect. There's 3 boxes you can check: suspect, victim, or subject. Suspect is checked. Name redacted. Suspect is checked. Bryan Kohberger. That means they knew about Bryan Kohberger. They knew, Moscow Police Department knew about Bryan Kohberger weeks before the FBI gave them the name on the 19th. What did Ann Taylor ask? How long has the FBI been co-located with you? What was Brett Payne's answer? For a few weeks at least. This would put it at this time frame. The FBI was already embedded with Moscow Police Department. It embedded, literally working side by side with them, and Bryan Kohberger's name is on there. The other thing that's going to be part of the second complaint you're going to hear from me is suspect number 2. That's right. There are 2 suspects. 2 suspects. I told you before. What if Bryan Kohberger was just the getaway driver? What if he did it with somebody else? In fact, what if he didn't even go into the house? Maybe he just drove the car, and maybe they knew all along Bryan Kohberger drove the car, but the problem is they can't get suspect number 1 because suspect number 1 is dead. That's my theory. Suspect number 1 is dead or being protected, but I think he's dead. And so the only person, they knew 2 people did it. That's why we got suspect 1 and 2. And my theory, this is my belief. I can't prove it. This is my belief, and that's why I'm asking for questions to have them clarify some things. It looks to me, and maybe reasonable people, that there are 2 suspects listed. So have you ever heard of 2 suspects? No, 1 suspect. So suspect 1 and 2, suspect 1 still being hidden from us to this day. Suspect 2, Bryan Kohberger. I think that was a mistake. They let us know that on the 5th, they already had Bryan Kohberger's name. Why does that matter? Because it wasn't until much later that allegedly, after they already knew who Bryan Kohberger was, and they already were looking into Bryan Kohberger, and they believed he may have been involved with someone else, because there's 2 suspects on there, and I've always thought if Bryan Kohberger did it, he did it with somebody. There's a second person on this piece of paper. They knew it was 2 people. They knew that Kohberger may have been one of them. That's my guess. They thought it was 2 people, and they knew Kohberger was one of them. Somebody made a mistake or did it on purpose to redact or unredact Bryan Kohberger's name so that we'd see that they had it on the 5th. Why does that matter? Because that means Ann Taylor has a reason to say, gee, you didn't come up with genetic genealogy information to place my guy at the crime until you decided who you wanted at the crime. Most people in America think they did it the other way around. They think that they developed the DNA, they discovered it was Bryan Kohberger, and then they made an arrest because they realized, oh shit, it's Bryan Kohberger, let's go arrest that guy. It's not how it happened. They knew who they wanted, Bryan Kohberger, and they all of a sudden came up with DNA that allowed them to help make that arrest. That's the opposite direction that we all think it happened. All right, now let's take a look at another document. This is the letter. This is now the formal complaint, if you will. I'm calling it a complaint, but it's not really, technically this is not a formal complaint. This is a records request and clarification is what it really is. So here it is. This is my letter. That's my name at the top. That's my P.O. box at the top. This is to the Moscow Police Department. Chief of Police Anthony Dallinger, Moscow PD, by the way. Dallinger is going to know my name, unfortunately. That could be a bad thing. Anyways, subject. Request for official explanation regarding conflicting statements about early identification of Bryan Kohberger. Does that make sense to you? Now that you saw what I showed you, it should make sense, right? I'm asking for official explanation. That's all I'm asking for. I'm just asking for an official explanation regarding conflicting statements. Now, I expect to be stonewalled on this. Is why we're going to take it to the next level, and that's going to cost money. But step one is giving the opportunity to explain. Dear Chief Dallinger, I am submitting this correspondence as a formal request for clarification and administrative review regarding a significant discrepancy discovered in publicly available records involving Corporal Brent Payne and the early identification of Bryan Kohberger. Background. During sworn testimony, Corporal Payne repeatedly stated that the first time he, and by extension Moscow Police Department, that's what I added in, learned the name Bryan Kohberger was on December 19th, 2022, when the FBI provided it. However, Idaho State Forensic Services evidence submission records show that on December 5th, 2022, Moscow Police Department submitted evidence paperwork listing Bryan Kohberger as a suspect, as well as one additional yet still unredacted name. I showed you those receipts. I am attaching the following documents for your review. Sworn testimony transcript excerpt from Corporal Payne. I gave them the first page or two showing that Brent Payne acknowledged that he had never heard of Bryan Kohberger prior to the 19th and that they heard it from the FBI. I also provided the ISP Forensic Services evidence report submission that I showed you on December 5th, showing that Bryan Kohberger's name was on there with another suspect. So I'm asking for a request for explanation. Given the contradictory nature of these records, I respectfully request an official written explanation addressing 1, how Moscow PD came to list Bryan Kohberger as a suspect on December 5th, 2022. 2, how this aligns or conflicts with Corporal Payne's sworn testimony given under oath. 3, whether an internal review, correction, or clarification has been initiated or completed. 4, whether the December 5th suspect designation was known to Corporal Payne at the time of the testimony. So in other words, I want them to verify, yes, Corporal Payne didn't lie. There's no way he knew. That's what I want them to say. I want you to confirm that he did not already know Bryan Kohberger's name on the 5th. Put that in writing. That's the important part. Put it in writing that Corporal Payne didn't know, because if you find out later on through a record search, which we will continue to do, that Corporal Payne did know Bryan Kohberger's name, you've got a problem. So they either have to admit, yeah, he did know it, he must have just forgot on the stand, or no, he didn't know it, and then we find the evidence that he did through clever public records request, and then they got a problem. That's why we're setting these things up. And yeah, we're tipping our hand. Moscow PD is probably watching this right now. Dallinger's probably been sent a video. Hey, dude, nothing personal, man. We're just doing business. It's nothing. No one in America should be afraid of questions. We are nowadays, but no one should be afraid of questions. It's just questions. That's all this is. Just questions. Please answer the question. Additionally, I would like to request the name of the second suspect shown as redacted on December 5th report, or cite the reason why this additional suspect remains under seal. Now, again, I don't believe they will ever tell us that. They're going to keep that sealed for forever. And I think I know who it is. I'll tell you who I think it is. And it's pure speculation, but it comes with a lot of reasons to think so. I believe that second person is Brent Copaka, Brent Lee Copaka, who was shot and killed a month and a couple days after the Idaho 4 murders, when his best friend, Brent Copaka, said, I think they suspected Brent was involved in those murders and they may have been overzealous and they shot and killed him. I think that too. I think that several agencies were looking into Brent Copaka and Bryan Kohberger as potential cohorts in the crime, and they shot and killed Brent Copaka, and they were left with only one guy left to pin the murder. murders on, and that was Bryan Kohberger. Now, when I say pin, you're like, well, wait a minute. If they did it, then they're not pinning it on somebody. They're getting the right guy. Yes and no, because again, the lies that have to be told to make it sound like I did this and I did it alone, and I'm going to testify on the stand that I did it by myself, means that they're covering a whole bunch of shit up. And so we're just asking. I'm going to clarify. Was that Brent Copaka on the other one? Now, I've asked for it. They're not going to tell me. And let me finish this letter and we'll move on to the next letters. This inconsistency has substantial implications for public confidence in the accuracy of sworn testimony made by law enforcement. Is that not true? Is it not true that when we in America who still have questions in this case see Brett Payne telling us they didn't know about him until the 19th, and now we see proof that they knew about him on the 5th, does that lead to public shaking of confidence? Have we not lost some confidence? Wait a minute. You told us one thing, but it's something else. So how many other things have you lied about? And again, lie is a tough word, so I don't want to use lie. How many other things have you misspoke about, misremembered in this case? How many things are you misremembering? Because again, no one's ever going to say I lied, because they're a deep shit if they say that. So they're going to say I misremembered, or it was you're not understanding it correctly. That's not what we really said. They're going to do every legal mechanism they can to get out of I lied under oath. It's going to be a misremember kind of bullshit. But anyways, I request a written response within a reasonable time frame of 30 days. Sincerely, my name and my contact information, and a copy of this letter went to the city attorney office in the city of Moscow, Mia Batista, and also to the Idaho State Patrol Police Director's Office, Colonel Bill Gardner. So they got a copy of that letter. Where that's 3 letters right there. That cost me $37 to send those out. And now comes some of the more fun stuff, because I believe Brent Copaka may have done it with Bryan Kohberger, or that Bryan Kohberger may have been there that night because Brent Copaka did it. I believe that there's a strong reason to believe Copaka. And again, I want to please have you understand. I apologize to the family of Brent Copaka if he had absolutely nothing to do with this. I'm just asking questions, and specifically, I want to make sure law enforcement acknowledges whether or not they ever looked into Brent Copaka. If they looked into him and they cleared him, your family, everyone, I want that clear. I want to clear the name of Brent Copaka. He's a soldier, former soldier, PTSD, died horribly in a standoff with SWAT team. I want that clear. I want his name cleared. But in order to clear his name, we have to remove the suspicion that he might have been involved. And that's all we're asking. Please help us do the right thing here. If Brent Copaka had nothing to do with it, quit telling us he had nothing to do with it, to shut the fuck up, and actually show receipts. Show us if you looked into Brent Copaka, because I know you were told about him, and then show us what you determined that made it so that it was impossible for Brent Copaka to be the one, and also tell me that second suspect that wasn't Brent Copaka on that sheet. All right. Have you followed the logic? Now let's get into this next letter. This is the letter to Moscow PD that is about Copaka. I'm looking for a public records request, all records involving or referencing Brent Lee Copaka, to the records custodian. Pursuant to the Idaho Public Records Act, and I list the documents, I respectfully request all records from January 1st, 2019 to present. Now, that's a little bit of an arbitrary date. I just picked a bit before the murders in 2022 because I know that Brent Copaka has a history and run-in with law enforcement. I know he does. Now, whether it was all in Washington or if it was Washington and Idaho, I don't know. But I'm just asking them. And by the way, I did ask also Pullman PD, and I did ask Whatman County in Pullman, or in Washington State. So other agencies are getting this request, but I want to know what specifically Moscow knows about them. Now, by the way, let me tell you a few things real quick before we finish this letter. Moscow PD and Idaho in particular are one of the worst. Idaho in particular is listed as one of the worst states for stonewalling people and not giving people what they ask. And they're one of the most restrictive of giving you what you ask when you do ask. Washington State, however, is much more, I'm told, much more giving of public records. When people ask for shit in Washington State, they are way more forthcoming. So the real break in this case, if Brent Copaka is involved, might come from Washington State, because Idaho's got this shit locked down. But we will pressure Idaho. We will pressure Washington. And we're going to probably have a better luck. If I were to put money on it, I would say we're going to have better luck on the Washington side getting some answers. But this one is addressed to Moscow PD. A similar went to Washington. All of it went out. That was another $40. I think it was 40 something dollars, $41, whatever. So we're up to about $100 in letters that I've sent in the last 2 days. And I can't wait to start getting the receipts in the mail that they've received them and signed for them, so I can talk to you about the process as we go through. But I'm going to need a little help because it's going to rack up fast. All right. So I want these all records from January 1, 2019 to present in the possession of Moscow Police Department that involve, reference, or contain the name Brent Lee Copaka, believed date of birth 10/4/1986. If known, please search all variations and spellings of the name is what I'm asking. Records that are requested, please. And I realize we're asking for a lot of records. And I realize they're going to come back and they're going to say, I'm sorry to give you that kind of information. We're going to need $20,000 and some kind of shit. Now, hopefully we won't get that answer, but we probably will. Or they'll tell us I'm asking for too much, but this is where you start. This is what I've been advised to start with, and I'm going to start with it. So, records requested. Please provide the following. 1, all incident reports, field interviews, officer notes, and police contacts involving Brent Lee Copaka. 2, all dispatch logs, CAD records, 911 calls, welfare checks, or service calls involving or referencing him. 3, all emails, memos, internal communication, bolos, bulletins, investigative notes, or tip sheets referencing Brent Copaka, Brent Lee Copaka, Copaka, or an alternate spelling. Any and all correspondence or records to discussing his possible involvement or connection or mention in relation to the November 13, 2022 Idaho homicides at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. Now, let me tell you 2 things that I think about this. I believe it is 100% impossible. This is my belief. It is 100% impossible. Moscow Police Department was not given Brent Lee Copaka's name. So what I'm asking is, did you ever get told the name Brent Lee Copaka and acknowledge that you did, and tell me what you did with those tips that came in? They said they received I want to say they received some ridiculous amount, thousands and thousands of tips from the tip line. I guarantee you, I rhetorically guarantee you, they know Brent Lee Copaka's name. And they knew it, and they had people giving tips, because I'm not the only one who suspected Brent Lee Copaka was involved. In fact, there are rumors that people said the night of his shooting, when Brent Lee Copaka was shot and killed, he yelled out something to the effect of, I didn't kill those kids. Other people said he yelled out, I killed those kids. Whatever the case may be, many people heard Brent Copaka uttered some kind of words in relation to those kids in Moscow, Idaho. So I know they looked into him, but we've never heard about it. And you know what has also never happened? Mainstream media never asks about Brent Lee Copaka. They never ask about him. So I'm filing a public records request specifically for Brent Lee Copaka, not Bryan Kohberger, Brent Lee Copaka. Let's talk about Copaka. So, all right. And I'm also asking for any interagency correspondence between Moscow Police Department and Pullman PD, because Pullman PD is where he was shot and killed. So did you guys talk about it? When Brent Copaka was shot and killed in Pullman, did you guys talk, Moscow Police Department with Pullman Police Department, about the possibility that Brent Copaka may have been involved in the Idaho 4 murders? I know you did. I don't know, but I'm asking. I'm not an idiot. I know you did. But I don't know what they did. What I'm saying is, I'm saying it doesn't take a rocket science to know that they know about Brent Copaka, and they had conversations about Brent Copaka, but I can't prove it. So that's why I'm saying I don't know you did, but I know you did. All right. I want any correspondence between Idaho State Police about Brent Copaka and Moscow Police Department, the FBI, Whitman County Sheriff's Office, Latah County Sheriff's Office, anything that references Brent Copaka. That's what I'm asking for. 5, any investigative follow-up regarding public records tips about Brent Copaka. Any investigative follow-up regarding public tips about Brent Copaka. Again, I'm telling you, I guarantee you people called in tips about Brent Copaka. So I want to know in their records what they did about it. Did they just say, hey, nothing to see here, we're not looking into Brent Copaka? Or did they hunt something down? When they did hunt something down, how did you rule them out? We need to see that, in my opinion, to get a little bit of trust back in the Moscow Police Department. Just tell us how you ruled out Brent Copaka. Any communicate, by the way, I've told people before, if you've ever watched my show, I've told people before, I think that Othram Labs developed the sample from the house at 1122 King Road to 4 brothers in Pennsylvania. And I told you that those 4 brothers, I believe, are Brent Copaka and his 3 other brothers. That was the 4 brothers that were identified from Pennsylvania. I know that his mother comes from Pennsylvania. I've had people that come on my channel say that they were neighbors with Brent Copaka in Pennsylvania. So there are rumors all over the place, but I cannot prove Copaka was in Pennsylvania. But I think that these guys knew each other, Kohberger and Copaka knew each other from Pennsylvania, and that they came out here, and that they lived literally across the street from each other in Pullman at the time of the murders. I think that's not just a coincidence. Even his own best friend, Brent Copaka's best friend, said, I think the Pullman Police Department thought that he was involved in the Idaho 4 murders, and that's why they were too quick to shoot. I'm not the only person who thinks this. Even his best friend said that. Okay. And again, Darren Duncan keeps going on telling people to leave him alone, leave the family alone. They're so sick of hearing it. It's tragic for them to hear Brent Copaka's name. I'm sorry. Even you, Darren Duncan, said, I think they thought he was involved with the murders and they may have been too quick to shoot. All I want them to do is acknowledge that you knew, that you had heard Brent Copaka was involved. And by the way, Darren and family, if it turns out that Pullman police did overshoot, or they were too zealous to shoot him because they thought he could be involved, that's only in your benefit for that to come out, because it would be a wrongful death suit. So it's only in your benefit. I'm not angry at the family of the Copakas. And I know they're probably angry at me. They're super pissed at me. Everyone's pissed at me for mentioning Brent Copaka's name. But in the end, if it turns out that it was an unlawful shoot because they were overzealous, because they thought he was the killer, because they had tips that he was involved with the murders, everyone should know that. All right. Any communication discussing, and this is the last one. This is a big one that a lot of people talk about. I just threw it in as a last. I don't expect anything to come of this. But it comes up all the time. People ask me. I'm asking for any communication discussing Judge John Judge in the case of Bryan Kohberger. That was the first judge presiding over the case before it got moved to Ada County and got put under Judge Hippler. Judge John Judge, and yeah, that's a real name. Please give me any communication discussing Judge John Judge in the case of Bryan Kohberger, starting to say the name Copaka in court by accident on February 28th, 2024, and case number, and I list the case number, and any discussion in email or other correspondence about that name being said in court. So yes, Judge said, something to do with Kohberger, and he started to say Copa. Everybody heard Copa. People freaked out. Oh my God, did Judge literally just say Copaka? And why wouldn't he if he was looking at a piece of paper like we just saw that had two suspects listed on it, Bryan Kohberger and Brent Copaka? Did he just simply look at that first line on that sheet that had Brent Copaka? Yes, Brent Copaka on it, and went, oh shit, like not Copaka, I mean Kohberger, the second guy on the list. Was that a Freudian slip? Was it an accidental slip? Was it just I meant to say Kohberger, but somehow it kind of came out as Copak, because Kohberger and Copa sound the same? That's the shit that they want to tell you. That's their official thing. Oh, he was trying to say Kohberger, but he kind of stumbled on his words and said Copaka. But you know what? They're going to play that game. And that's why you're going to have to press even further. If any portion of this request is denied, and of course they're going to deny it, please cite the specific statutory exemption relied upon as required by Idaho code, blah, 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 and release all segregable portions. So anything you can tell me about Brent Copaka, tell me. Everything else you want to keep locked down, please cite the reasons why you're keeping it locked down. That's what I'm asking for. I'm willing to pay reasonable copy fees, not $20,000 for your investigation. You can just pack sand and I will fight you on that. But please notify me if the cost exceeds $50. Thank you sincerely. There we are. All right. Last letter I'm going to read for you as another. And so this letter, by the way, and one just like this letter, went also to Pullman Police Department for their records involving Brent Copaka, and also other entities. And now let's talk specifically, lastly, about the shooting in Pullman of Brent Copaka. This is where it's we might get the most fruit, because I'm asking SWAT, Police Department, Pullman Police Department, Whitman County Sheriff's Office to respond to the actual shooting and tell us a little bit more about that. Which again, I feel like mainstream media didn't press on this issue, because again, all we were told is shut the hell up about Copaka. It's not Copaka. You guys are shaming a veteran. And again, I hope that we can clear his name. That's what I'd love to do. I want to clear his name. And I want to know how they cleared his name. All right, subject. Request for official clarification regarding early investigative consideration of Brent Lee Copaka and the Moscow homicide. So I'm saying right here, I want to know if you ever investigated Brent Lee Copaka in relation to the homicides. Because again, Darren Duncan said, I think they thought he was involved in those homicides. I'm not the only asshole making that up, right? Best friend said that. Dear Chief Dallinger, I am writing to request an official clarification regarding whether the name Brent Lee Copaka, assumed date of birth 10/4/1984, was ever considered, evaluated, or dismissed as a potential lead or person of interest by your agency during the investigation into the November 13, 2022 homicides in Moscow, Idaho. That's something I don't believe they have ever publicly said. If they did, I'll eat my shit. But I don't believe anybody's ever asked them, hey, was Brent Lee Copaka ever on your radar? And if so, how did you rule him out? That's what we're asking. And here's where it gets interesting. I'm going to give some reasons why Brent Lee Copaka would have maybe risen to the level of your interest in the investigation. Given that Mr. Copaka lived minutes from the 1122 King Road residence, Mr. Copaka once gave law enforcement an address of the Pimlico Apartments, that's in Pullman, as his residence, which is across the street from the Steptoe Apartments, where the lead suspect, Bryan Kohberger, lived at the time of the murders in Pullman, Washington. Mr. Copaka was killed at the Coffee House Apartments in Pullman, Washington, on the opposite side of town from where he was listed as a resident. So again, what I'm hinting at there is why did he tell officers on body-worn camera footage that he lived at the Pimlico Apartments over by Kohberger, but then then later on when you shot and killed him, it was at the Coffee House Apartments where you tell us he was living just a couple months later or a few months later. So explain that discrepancy if you know it, and I do think they know it. Furthermore, given that he was killed by a Pullman SWAT on December 15, 2022, and multiple sources and public tips named him as a possible suspect or person of interest. See, I'm calling it out. I know people have mentioned Brent Copaka since day one, practically. Investigative inconsistencies have been publicly acknowledged. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, given the fact that investigative inconsistencies have been publicly acknowledged, we want to know now what up with Brent Copaka. Just tell us. Just tell us how you ruled him out. I respectfully request that your agency confirm, 1, whether your agency received any tips, leads, or communication naming the reference or referencing Brent Lee Copaka or any variation of that name thereof. 2, whether his name was ever entered into your suspect, lead, or investigative tracking system, like maybe when it showed up on that form from Idaho State. I don't know that it did, right? It's redacted. But if his name is on line 1, I want them to admit, has his name ever appeared in any of your investigative tracking systems? Did you type in his name and did it show up on line 1 as suspect 1 that you've kept redacted? Whether any internal discussions occurred regarding potential involvement or exclusion, and 4, whether your agency exchanged information with Pullman Police Department, Washington Police Department, or WSU Police Department, the FBI, or Idaho State Police regarding Brent Copaka, and 5, whether any formal determination or review was completed regarding his potential relevance to this investigation. Was there any formal determination or review if Brent Copaka was involved with the Idaho murders? That's part of the discussion. This request is not an accusation. I'm making sure you guys know. I'm not telling you that you're lying and hiding about Brent Copaka. I'm asking you, did you look into Brent Copaka? Tell us, did you look into Brent Copaka? And if so, how did you rule him out? It's not an accusation. It's a question. It is an attempt to understand and clarify inconsistencies in publicly available records, and I request written response within 30 days. So there you have it. That is the gist of my complaint and my argument. I want to share with you now how you can help out. I've created a GoFundMe page. Support transparency in Moscow, Idaho case, Idaho 4 Public Records Fund. We've raised a couple of donations already. This is going to be a long fight. I started out with a budget of $4,000 because I think it'll easily exceed that. No part of the money, if you do decide to help out with this cause, and again, my appeal to you is the only thing that's good or necessary for evil to triumph is for good men and women to sit and do nothing. So just sit there and take it and just say, well, I guess that's what happened. That's how the cookie crumbles. I guess Kohberger goes to jail for something that he may or may not have done. If you're just going to take that and do nothing about it, that's how shit gets evil prevails. That's how evil prevails. Now, I'm not saying, by extension, I'm not saying Moscow Police Department is evil. I'm not saying the state of Idaho is evil. I'm not saying Judge Hippler is evil. Let's not get those personal attacks going. What I'm saying is that bad things happen if good people just remain silent and don't pressure. So let's pressure. And if you want to help out, please go to the GoFundMe page and support that. On my screen, I'll also show the GoFundMe QR code that you can scan with your phone. If you're watching this on your TV, if you're watching this on your phone, I guess you can't do that. But if you're watching it on your TV or a laptop or something like that, you can put your phone up there. You can click on that. You can take a picture of it. You can get a QR code. You can go right to the page and you can donate. Just $20-25 could help send several letters. Those letters, certified letters going so far, the ones that I've been sending are running about $10 a piece. So $20 sends 2 letters, $40 sends 4 letters. There are lots and lots of letters to go. Again, good men and women, rise up. Let's put some pressure on and ask some questions. None of this is accusations. It is questions because public confidence in some agencies has been shaken. Please restore our public confidence by telling us you did the right thing and that you aren't hiding anything. Good luck, everybody.